Tania and I are doing this as a follow-up to episode 2 of In Conversation with Lisa Rose, which is a conversation series that I'm producing. And you can find the original In Conversation with our guest, Tania Costantini Zimmermann, who is a transformational life coach. And she's working with women that are interested in finding partners at this point in life. She's also an expert in the bars method, and she's an energy worker and a healer. So, I could go on and on. Suffice it to say that we're here today to help you. And well, it's really like a coaching session because we're taking your questions, right? So earlier in the episode 2 of In Conversation with my guest, we talked about a lot of topics, how to prepare yourself for love and for partnership, how to know if what it is that you're doing is working. We talked about travel and is location important, and the checklist, what needs to be considered when you're going into a partnership, and all sorts of things. One of the central themes in our conversation was intuition, something that Tania and I are both experts and trainers in as well, and how our natural intuition played an important role in guiding us toward that which would best serve us in terms of partnership and relationship. So I also sent out an email letting people know about this and asked for some questions if they couldn't come live. So I have a couple, couple of questions. And then for those of you that are interested and want to hang out a little bit later, I'm going to share my passion spell.
Ooh, I'm very intrigued by that.
So now please don't be jumping in criticizing me on the spell part, because it's white magic, not black magic. Okay, number 1.
Oh, good.
And number 2, the passion has to already exist for the spell to work, so you are not imposing on someone's free will. But it is a great test.
Ooh, I love that.
Right, so the response to the spell comes when the passion has already existed. It works like an amplifier or an accelerator pedal, and I've tested it out, and you can use it in a bunch of different situations. But in here we're talking about the passion spell in terms of identifying romantic partners. Okay, so let me start with the first question. This is interesting, particularly for women like us of a certain age who have had some life road under our feet, right? How important, Tania, do you think it is to know the history of the other person, particularly in terms of why didn't the marriage work out? How many girlfriends have you had? What was the reason for the breakup? Did you go into therapy together? I mean, how much of their history do we need to know?
That's a really interesting question. There are 2 ways to answer that, right? One is, of course, the more logical mind, which says, okay, right, a history of a person shows certain things. Yeah, if you know why the relationship or the marriage broke up, there might be an indicator there what kind of person he or she is. But I also believe that people can grow and change. So sometimes knowing too much too early, I find that that's more a block, because then you jump to conclusions about the person instead of seeing them for who they are right now. Because I know from personal experience, I've changed a lot. I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago. And, my story doesn't sound great when you listen to it, but I'm a different person now. Yeah. And I've encountered many such cases. So it's a bit go with your intuition on that. And yes, be curious, but don't take it. Yeah. Don't jump to conclusions when you hear certain things. That's what I would say. How about you, Lisa? What would you say?
Well, I'll share a little bit about my own personal experience. Now, I've had several relationships, but I've only been married one. I'm wife number 3 for the partner. I'm number 3 and he's number 1. And I thought about this, and I didn't get married till I was almost 30. And I thought, should I ask? I knew that there was a divorce. But I didn't know until, probably 3 years into the relationship, how many divorces there were.
Wow, okay.
And I can remember when we first moved in, that Valentine's Day, because I moved across the country, we met, happened very quick, I moved across the country. We decided we would move in together. We didn't really have a commitment yet. We're going to see how it worked out. You know, that's what it's like when you're only dating for 3.5 weeks and you decide to move across the country with somebody. And then Valentine's Day came, and I had like 10 Valentine's Day cards that were delivered to the house. And I just opened them all up and I set them all up real nice. You know, I thought, he hasn't asked me once about any of these cards or these people or anything. He sees the cards there, you know? And I said, don't you want to know about these other, you know, relationships that I had? And he said, all I need to know is that you were really well loved. Look at all those cards.
Wow, I love that approach.
So I thought to myself, do I dare ask my question? And, you know, and I said, why don't you want to know anything about, you know, my other relationships and, you know, what happened? And he said, because it has nothing to do with us. So it has zero, has absolutely zero to do with us. That was who you were then with those people. And I certainly don't think that you're just, you know, a mimeograph or a fact, you know, a fax copy of the same thing. You know, what we have is a different dynamic, and it's working. So I don't need to know. I said, well, I think I might need to know a little more information at some point on my end. A little Q&A session, but it wasn't until several years after I was married.
Really?
I didn't even,
wow.
Yeah, I remember I didn't even meet his family until I was married for 10 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. Interesting.
This story brings me actually to the second question, because that question gets asked a lot, because that scenario happens a lot. And I've even seen it in my own clients where there is I'm going to say a big breakup. You know, you're breaking up a family, you're breaking up a house, you're breaking up assets, you're breaking up friends, you know, extended families, etc. And it's a big breakup. And sometimes, and it could just be, this is all I've been exposed to. A lot of times the men don't do it until there's somebody else waiting in the wings. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes for women, it's so painful. They don't want anybody waiting in the wings for a little while. But then in swoops what I call the transition man, or if you're you know, if you're into women, right, transition woman, or your transition person, let's say, to be politically correct. But I've always termed it the transition man. Mm-hmm. And it's this person that comes in, and it's fabulous relationship, probably lasts for a year or two. And then, you know, you come to and you realize that that was the transition person. You know, so the question is, of course, the question is, how do you know? How do you know if it's the transition person? Yeah. The one that held the space to put you back together, but isn't really the one.
It's really interesting, no? Because a lot of people talk about that transition person. And I think it's really, you can't put a rule to that. It's really totally personalized to each person. And I've had people whose transition person turned out to be the one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is this thing in our heads, no, that the person who comes after a breakup is just the transition person. And that's sometimes not fair, right? Because there's potential there as well. So that's my first advice, to not go into that like, oh yeah, that's just the transition person. Be always open. You never know, right, what the possibility is with that person. And how do you know? The great question, right?
That is the toughest one of them all.
Time will tell, because there is a little bit, no? There is a bit about the pressure we sometimes put on. No matter if it's the transition person or if it's somebody who's really looking for a relationship and kind of like, can't wait to meet the one. And there's so much pressure and there's so much expectation. And that sometimes destroys things also a little bit. Yeah, because of the pressure. So I always say, why not be just present with what is and enjoy and see where it leads you.
Particularly when it's going extremely well.
Yes.
Because oftentimes that transition person isn't the one that you have been having in your fantasy, but it sometimes is a wonderful surprise. And if you give it some time, then you can tell. But during that period of you're in transformation, of course, because you're leaving a relationship and you're creating a new life for yourself, maybe even for yourself and your children and your family. And that takes time for you to go through and figure out, well, what is it that I want next? And the transition person may fit where you were in that moment when you met, and they're good, in terms of having a relationship through the transition. They're very supportive. And then it might not work out when you get to that spot where you are who you want to be and who it is that you want to attract, and then it will naturally sort of dissipate. So that's one. I would say the other is when you never get to the yes.
Hmm.
When you're in the relationship and you never feel comfortable with the next step.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Yeah.
And I would think that I see that sometimes that happens in relationships that are long-term, that are committed, and one person is ready to get engaged and the other person's, well, let's just save a little bit more money.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I'm not really quite ready. I think, I want to save up a little bit more money, or maybe we should get the house first. Let's get the house first, and then we'll talk about it. And then, then before you know it, 5 years go by, and you have the house, you have the dog, you have the friends, you might even have the photographer. And you finally say, okay, ready for this next step. And the other person just bolts, or they say to you, I'm really ready for this next step. And then you have to say, I think we're not on the same page. We don't have the same level of commitment, So that would be one indicator. But I think the latter example works both for the transition person and if you selected a person that isn't really suitable. It just sort of, the dynamic never gets it to the next step where you're in the big love bubble, forever, right?
I think one really good thing to do quite early is to have a chat about those things, right? Yeah. To know if you're on the same page. Yeah. Yes. So I remember my partner, right, after the first kiss, he asked me, do you still want children? And I was like, okay, we just had our first kiss, I'm like, interesting. But he was like, yeah, because I don't want children, and I want to make this clear, because otherwise it was a nice kiss and we are not even need to move forward. And I thought, like, wow, that was really honest and refreshing, but very useful. Yeah. And the same, like, within a week we had that chat, do you want to get married? And I'm like, no. And he said no. And yes, we are committed, but it was really good to be from the start on the same page. Because otherwise you reach that point and you wait for the next step, and maybe your person isn't into marriage or isn't into having kids. So that's one thing I learned.
How many partners do we have to stay with before understanding he is the right one?
That's a lovely question. I would love to say, oh, you have to have at least 10 men, right? And then the 11th is the one, no? Or third time lucky, like you, Lisa Rose, no? There is no answer to that, really. No, that's so different. I mean, there are people who met in high school and are still together 40 years, and others who have had lots of partners and not. I think it so depends on you personally, and your experiences and your growth, and that many, particularly women, have bad experiences, and then they kind of like lose faith and hope, and they say, oh, love is not for me, and it's kind of like, no, keep doing the work, the inner work, and keep going. No, there is one out there.
So what about, for example, let's say right after a divorce, right? You get a divorce. Should you be jumping into a marriage right away with the next wonderful one that comes along? Or do you think that maybe there ought to be a little bit of a time period and maybe dating around first?
Again, it so depends, right? But a lot of people, if you've been married for a long time, it's also all people who got married very young. They then suddenly have that, they catch up on their youth, and it's great to experiment a bit if you've never had that, no? And do the dating and see what's out there, and maybe build your confidence, or find out what you really like right now as the person who are in this moment.
Yeah, exactly. I think it goes back to, are you just acting out of desperation because you don't want to be alone, or you're afraid, oh gee, I still look good enough now, maybe I can get somebody, rather than what is it that I want and who would be a wonderful partner for that. Yeah, I would say so.
Exactly. To use that time for that as well, no? To really go like,
Mm-hmm,
okay, I'm not that person I was when I
mm-hmm,
got married. So what do I want now?
mm-hmm.
What am I looking for? And we talked in our other chat, we talked a bit about, what am I desiring, what
Yes,
characteristics, and so on. And things
yes.
change as we grow older, right?
Mm-hmm.
And our priorities change. So it's also a great opportunity to actually take that time for oneself.
What does ideal partner mean?
Yeah, I use that to avoid saying your soulmate and your twin flame and all those words, which I find have also so much expectations and so much kind of heavy energy on it, no? Because they're combined with so much pressure. So I say ideal partner in the sense of the person that has the things you are looking for, whatever that is. So we all have our own wish list, and so your ideal partner is the person who has the things you are looking for and who is a good match.
So let's say you're in a relationship with someone and it seems to be going pretty good, and then you decide this really isn't the relationship. There's something missing. I think I want to uh, continue my search for someone more suitable. What's your best breakup approach, Tania?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. Because I've been single for so long, right? So this is my first relationship after 10 years. So I'm a bit out of practice with breakups. I think communicating is always important. No matter if it's a breakup or the start of a relationship or in a relationship, it's be honest and talk to the person. Definitely not the phone breakup and thank you and goodbye. I think that's really unfair. No, my approach is always be kind to the person. Treat others as you would like to be treated, no, with respect and with kindness. And if it doesn't work out, then fair enough. But how about we approach this, with kindness and caring? And I think that's maybe also a newer approach, that a breakup doesn't have to be the big trauma and drama, that the breakup isn't, oh my God, now we have to hate each other. I know so many people who have actually split up and they're still good friends,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it just doesn't work. Fair enough, right?
I think that how you break up with someone is so revealing of your true character, right? So if you operate and you live your life with integrity, the breakup, you don't run away at the breakup. And particularly if you're the one who's initiating it, you have to be even extra careful because someone has already placed their heart in your hands. They're hopeful. They might be doing everything that's right. And this idea that all you have to do is ghost them and they'll get the message is completely juvenile
No,
and
no.
unacceptable. But so we don't, obviously, the text message is unacceptable. Always contact the person, give them an opportunity to, if you don't live together, obviously, right? You're going to meet them somewhere or say, I have something I want to talk to you about. And ask them their feeling about it too, and say, this is just how I feel that. And it isn't anything personally that you did, but I'm not the best match for you because I'm feeling like this isn't a good match for me. And I know women who have had 4 ex-husbands and they are all best friends.
Awesome. Wow. Incredible.
Where, right? And she breaks up beautifully.
Does she give lessons?
I don't think so, but she probably ought to, and of course, we all know the ugly horror stories of breakup, right? Where you've been, ghosted, or you've been blamed, or the bag of shit's laid at your doorstep instead of it being a conversation about why it's not working. But it's interesting because those that have handled the breaking up with integrity and with love and with care are usually still on good terms with their ex, and they're well thought of. Now, you and I are energy workers, so we know that creates an energy as well. If you break up badly or you're unkind to people, that sticks on you, and people see that and feel that until you find a way to cleanse yourself and make amends. But when you don't, you just, in terms of attracting the right person, you'll attract people that also behave that way. So that if they feel like it's not working out for you, with you, you will be treated with love and kindness and respect, and maybe let down easier than just being thrown under the bus or tossed away in a trash can, so to speak, you know? I think we probably have time for one more, and then I have to share my spell.
Yes, please.
Okay. So here's a question, Tania, right? And this is it's none of your business question, right? But let's talk about it anyway.
Okay.
Should we be having sex right away? I mean, you know, do we bring sex into the relationship right away, or do we wait until there's some feeling? I mean, now we're not talking about one night stands, because that's not a relationship, right? I guess, unless that's how you do it, but it's not what we're talking about. We're talking about relationship. So, you know, when shall we use our bodies to express how we feel and demonstrate it for another person that we feel love for? And are there any rules?
I don't believe in rules, right? So I keep saying that, and I'm going to repeat it. Whatever works for you. Whatever works for you and that person, because it is different every time. And at the end of the day, I learned, and the advice I give to my clients is to create your own rules, create your own, you know, create the relationship that works for you and that person, not anybody else. So, you know, all these rules, how a woman is supposed to behave and so on, check it out, right? And go with your intuition, go with what feels right in that moment. And if that's straight away, then so be it, you know. And if you want to wait longer because you feel you want to get to know the person and you take a little bit more time to trust or so on, then do that. I find that all these kind of like rules and the whole like how a relationship should be, it's so much pressure. It's so much, you know. That's the whole tapping into your body, tapping into your intuition, right? And to create something out of that. And that looks different for you and your partner and me and my partner and everybody else, you know, and people look and say, ooh, how does that work? But if it works for you, then great.
You know, I was raised in a Catholic family where you're supposed to wait until you get married, you know, with the rules and all that. But I can remember one time being told, you should be waiting until after you get married to be doing it. And then once you get married, have as much sex as you want, you know, have it every day. We like lots of children. And I remember at that time, and I was very young, my response was, but how do I know that we're a good match in bed? Maybe he's a freak. Maybe I'm not going to find out that, you know, who he really is until, you know, then I don't want to have a ring on my finger and then find out if we're
very smart.
You know, they were just shocked.
Yeah.
But I thought that was part of the package. Some people, they change in the bedroom, right? So it is important to know whether or not you are sexually compatible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I totally agree with that.
And how that energy is, because in fact, and I'm eventually going to do a whole series, I think, on sex. So I'm going to have you come back and talk. We'll talk about
yes, let's talk about sex.
But on that energy of sex, right? When you're having sex with someone, you are exchanging and intermixing energy, right? So my question sort of goes to, gee, you know, do you know them well enough that you really want to get down and dirty and start exchanging energy with them on that level? You know, you better be really sure about this selection before you go in that direction. I often wonder if you're not, you know, if sex isn't, and when I mean sacred, I don't mean in the context of dogma. I mean where there's a preciousness about it in relationship with the other person. Whereas, you know, if you're a person who just likes to have one night stands, doesn't really want a commitment, and you're having sex with people, a lot of people, and you're exchanging that energy with them, you know, and then you find out, gee, you're really having trouble attracting a serious relationship. It's because you got all this other energy that isn't your own. Exactly. So it requires the clearing out process, which we had talked about in Conversation episode 2, where you have to do the work in order to prepare yourself for the relationship that you really want. Yeah, so sex is, you know, I thought that would be a good ending question.
Yeah, it is an ending question that opens up a whole Pandora's box, and we can talk for hours and hours and hours.
Okay, so the passion spell.
Yes, tell us.
I'm not going to demo it because it's very powerful, obviously. I'll just talk about
I'm gonna write it down. I'm here with my pen.
The passion spell. And I wish I could tell you where I found this, because I found it a long time ago and I jotted it down. So it wasn't my original idea, but I tweaked it. So a drop of your blood. I use a very needle that's sterilized, and I'm very careful, all of that. It helps if you know where you bleed quickly, right? It can be your fingertips or wherever, but you need a drop of blood. And if the other person, your paramour, is present, you can use a drop of that person's blood too. But more often than not, they're not present. So you use 2 drops, one that represents you and one that represents person of affection or desire that you're might be in a relationship, or you might just be kindling a relationship. So we've got that. What do you do with it? You drop it onto some incense. Now, it's great if you have patchouli incense, which is one of the ingredients in this spell. I don't. I use only pure Japanese incense, which has no fillers and gums and wood or anything in it. So I use patchouli oil, essential oil, and I put a drop, and you only need 1 drop, onto the incense stick, on the top of the incense stick. And on top of that, I put the drops of blood. Best if you get a drop so it drops on, but if you can't, you can hold it right there so it absorbs, always in a downward direction, because you don't want anything that's in the incense to go into your bloodstream, obviously. Right, so now we've got the incense, we've got the patchouli, we have the blood. You fire it up, creates some smoke. The smoke is an important element. And then you have an apple, and you pass the apple through the smoke once, and you will say blood of your name. And then you pass the apple the other way, blood of the partner's name, through the smoke. United as one, right? So blood of X, blood of Y, united as one. And then you cut the apple in half, and you lay the apple on, I usually lay it in a small dish, but you could lay it right in front of the incense burner. You let the incense burn all the way down. Now, I also like to add to that, where I usually have the person in my mind. Now, we're talking about this in the context of relationships and love, but this is a spell that I'm talking about using today for discovering a couple of things. First of all, whether or not that person has passion, feels passionate about you. Not love, right? We're talking about passion. It's passion. Passion eventually turns into love. Passion comes before the love part. And usually you will hear from that person. That person will reach out to you, usually within 30 days. Now, when I was testing this, and I tested it in a couple of different directions and ways, and different people, and I heard from them, first one was 7 days. Then I tested it again on that same person, 2 days. Then I tested on another person, it was 3 weeks. Then I tested it again, and it was 1 day. It happens pretty quick. If there's nothing happening after 4 weeks, then the passion doesn't exist. Because it's passion enhancer. So sometimes, this would be wonderful when someone's not getting back to you, you're not really sure about the situation. Maybe they're shy, the other person's shy and not as communicative. You and I are Aries, right? We sit at the table, yes. We just let it all hang out, baby. We're just like, this is how it is.
Yeah. And pretty straightforward and pretty direct. So
yeah, we're like, this is it. We're showing you the cards. This is how we feel. How do you feel? Sometimes I don't want to tell you, right? So I was shocked at how quickly it works, and assuredly it's white. I want to say white magic. It comes out of the realm of white magic.
Yeah, of course.
So if there's nothing happening, that means that there isn't any passion there to accelerate.
Okay. And do you do it on a specific moon cycle, like on the full moon or on the new moon or something?
Full and new. I found that when you do it on the full moon or the new moon, it's pretty quick. I mean, obviously you could take the chance to do it anytime, but if you can wait for the moon cycles, it works pretty quick. You know what I think it is? I think that the energy is delivered more directly, more quickly, more intensely during the full moon and the new moon.
Always. Yeah.
So it's kind of like going, express delivery.
Exactly. Everything is supercharged, and it's like the
Yes.
universe is waiting for our wishes and for our magic.
Can you talk about polyamory?
I would say what I said earlier, do whatever works for you. It's
And
kind
the
of
partners.
the quick answer, right? If
Yeah.
you want to play with that, then go for it.
You have to consider the other person. I mean, if they're not expecting a polyamorous situation, you know, you don't fake that. That has to be so upfront, like open marriages.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It
But what do you think?
requires a lot of communication, a lot of open and honest communication, to be really honest with yourself. I've seen many couples where one agreed because the other wanted that, and they were deep inside not happy with that, and it's only so long that you can maintain that, no? So
Correct.
communication is the key, real honesty, knowing yourself as well, so that you know what is it you desire, what are your boundaries, and then make that happen. And again, no rules. And
Yeah, and to in my view, polyamory is where you are not looking to be committed. It's not that you're shopping around trying everybody out and then you're going to select one. That's dating.
yes,
Right?
yes.
Polyamory is where you're literally giving pieces of your heart, or you feel from your perspective, you're giving your whole heart many times to many people, and that's more satisfactory. But there's a big difference between polyamory and shopping around for a partner.
Totally, totally. Like you said, it's a buzzword, and a lot of people use it as an excuse, like
Yeah.
as a wild card also within
Yes.
relationships, and that's not what it is exactly.
No.
And then there's so many models. I've met people who are living this in so many different constellations, let's say.
Yes.
And yeah, so you know, whoever comes together has to find a way they make it work for them.
Okay. So I want to thank
Yes.
everybody for joining us. If you haven't seen episode 2 of In Conversation with Lisa Rose with Tania Costantini Zimmermann, check us out on YouTube. You can find Tania at rainbowalchemy.com. You can find me at trulyliving.net. And we hope you'll join us again soon. Thank you, Tanya.
Yes. Thank
Such
you,
a
Lisa.
pleasure to
Thank you,
see you.
everybody.